Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the 7th episode of Binge Worthy Podcast. I am your co-host, G Oliver.
And I'm Nate.
What's up, Nate? And I'm Nate. Come on, man. You gotta introduce yourself in here.
I mean, I'm just Nate. I'm just Nate at this point.
I can dig it. We're
ending out the year, and
3 episodes left. You getting tired, man?
Yeah, I'm a
We've
little.
been talking about a lot of movies. We've been talking about a lot of film. So,
no, it's really making time for all of them and just adding it into my day. So,
well, you like the radio connoisseur out here. You got congratulations. Look like you made a new move. Another just.
Oh, you meant that?
You want to talk to us about what that was?
So I've been technically doing that for almost 2 months now, but I fall behind on chronicalizing or whatever you say, portfolio in my work, putting it in portfolio and showing my work. I'm horrible at that, so I figured I've been
because you do it for the love, not for the accolades.
No, it's work at this point. I like the paycheck, but it's definitely just figuring out. Being a one-man team, you can sometimes forget things. And I try to, now that everything is at home, I have everything in front of me. So I literally have 3 laptops going. So I have one where I'm watching movies on, and the other one where I'm doing classes, and the other one is just trying to figure out my personal computer. But
here's the thing, I wish I could do that. I could do that. And you've made mention, we've talked a lot since we started putting this series together. And one of the things that I realized is that you've made mention of your ability to multitask on several occasions, and multitask where as though you're doing something, but you also are watching a movie. You might be doing 2, like you said, you got 2 computers or 3 computers set up. You're doing that, but then you also watching this. You also watching this movie, right? For the show. It's the complete opposite for me. I can multitask work. If I'm working, I can multitask and that, but I can't. I can put on whatever I can always put something on while I'm working, but I am not paying attention to it. I would be worthless in a conversation about it afterwards. So for me, in order to watch and give some, I have to stop. I have to find time to really focus on these shows or movies. I have to stop to watch them, because otherwise they'll just be on for me.
You'll learn the longer we do this, the better you'll get at it. And it's in me doing, because in interviewing people, I'm reading books, I'm watching music videos, listening to their music, or going to their art shows. I have to try to. I don't do the cram method very well, so I'll watch stuff. So I'll listen to people's music when I'm doing my housework instead of listening to the music I normally listen to. Or if I'm watching a movie, is when I'm stationary. Right now, it's easier because all my work is literally either I'm in my bedroom or I'm in my living room, and that's where I'm at for the whole day. So it's easier for me to multitask. But you'll learn how to, because. And the secret side of it is you have to make people think that you really indulge in their work. And I do for the most part. But I've interviewed maybe 90 authors since I started doing radio. And I have 90 books on my shelf. Have I read all 90 of them? Probably not. But I know how to skim through. I know how to, ask questions that give me insight because it's impossible to do all that in the course of a day. It's easier now than what it used to be. Because when I was at the school during the day and at the station at night, and then rehearsals after that. And so it was harder to catch up. But now I don't have a choice but to. So I've learned how to do it. But once the doors to the world open back up, it's not going to be that easy again. But You'll get the hang of it. It'll come easier to you.
No, hopefully. So, as always, we are Binge Worthy Podcast, and our podcast is really we review and highlight the historical, social, and cultural connections in film and TV, and almost assuredly how that relates to Black people and those of the African diaspora. We have a pretty eclectic lineup for this evening. We're gonna start off with a recent Netflix original film, All Day and a Night. We're gonna talk about a classic Black film directed by and starring our very own Denzel Washington, Anton Fisher. We're going to talk about the TV series Underground, which was a groundbreaking television show, in my opinion, now that I've seen it and got to take some of it in. We're going to talk about a recent horror / thriller / comedy film on Hulu called Bad Hair. We're going to talk about a couple Christmas movies. We each chose our favorite Christmas movie. I chose the seminal classic Die Hard as my Christmas movie. Nate chose The Preacher's Wife. We're going to talk about the Chris Rock documentary Good Hair. And we're going to wrap it all up with a conversation about the classic Chapelle show that we also know was doomed due to various forces and circumstances. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So we're going to start.
Did you say Bad Hair?
I did say Bad Hair.
Okay, I didn't hear you. Okay.
I did say Bad Hair. But we're going to start with a recent Netflix original film that was released a few weeks ago, starring one of my favorite and most underrated actors, Jeffrey Wright. And then a young man who I think is really becoming like one of those like up and coming kind of star. And that movie is All Day and a Night.
Yeah. I
did not care for this film that much.
Well,
I had to be honest about that.
I think because and I don't even think did I put it on here? I think I
see it in the background.
No, I have like the other image of it, but I enjoy the story. Once again, this is one of those films, and it's going to be something that I do continuously. But I don't like when I don't like films that depict street life. I just, for some reason, I don't care for them, and it's not. I don't want to be that person that doesn't. That I believe all stories should be told, but in some point, oh here it is. At some point, we have to give balance in stories. And this young man, he is really good because we first saw him that I remember in Moonlight. So the contrast.
His name is Ashton Sanders. Yeah, Ashton Saunders. I'm sorry.
So the contrast in those two characters are night and day, but they're still along the same line of the same character. And I'm noticing Netflix and HBO Max and all of them are in many ways recycling their actors a lot. So if it's something like Moonlight is on Netflix, but you'll see him in other Netflix stories, either originals or stuff that was brought to, you'll see them recycle a lot of their characters. And this was one I was glad to see recycled because you don't see this character in many things. I don't want him to keep playing those dark characters though. I want him to do something that stretches who he is. This one stretched him in a different way because it had nothing to do with his sexuality, but more so that persona of manhood. I liked it. I enjoyed it. The story. I don't always like the the imagery of like gang or violence. I don't gravitate to that, but I did enjoy the story. I think it could have been better, but hey, it was Netflix. You only paid $15, so
yeah. So my thoughts on the movie. First of all, the acting is phenomenal. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Wright, he never fails. Ashton Sanders, for all that I found a lot of faults in the film. But none of those faults, I don't think any of those faults came down to the performances.
That could have been just directing.
So what I didn't like, and I think my issue with it had a lot to do with what your issue is, although I think I see it from a different perspective. So I don't have a problem with the street life movies, right? I thought that this particular movie, it almost was like it was downplaying itself. I felt like the story that it was telling was beneath the. I felt like it was just beneath the film. So if I'm looking at this from what you said, Nate, and I agree with you that I think that we do need to offer different perspectives and different outlooks, we need to offer up more stories than just the typical like. I'm down and out, and I'm going to make the worst possible decisions to end up.
It justifies reality too much.
And I don't always agree with that assessment, although I do understand how you arrive to that conclusion. But for me, I just felt like it was trying too hard because there was a smartness to this film. Like there was an intelligence to this film.
Yeah.
It just did not lend itself to the story, in my opinion. Like I'm watching what I've come to view as very typical like behavior, decision-making, and circumstances. And yet it's being kind of portrayed to me in this really kind of like thoughtful, intelligent way, where I would have liked to seen that applied to a story that didn't just amount to me making the worst possible decision and then ending up in jail for it and then learning my lesson when it's too late.
What what I loved about it was as close to the truth as we often get to see.
Right.
And I think the artistic part of the film may distract people a little bit because there was a lot of flashing back, and the story, it was like the same storyline was going, but they cut it in threes, and it was just overlapping, and you had to really follow the story or you would get lost in it at some point.
And I guess and maybe that's what it was. Maybe what you're saying is absolutely right, that there was this intelligent narrative to the film.
Yeah. You had to understand what was going on.
Right. And the story to me just didn't justify all that.
Yeah.
I found myself, because of the narrative and just the overall like and I'm using the word intelligence because I really can't think of a word to substitute for it. It just seemed to me to be a very smart film with a really dumbass story. If I had to put it in the simplest terms, is like it almost was like a waste to me because I felt like
your point of view be so drastic. It don't ever have like a gray space. No.
And I guess it's just because I struggle with how like what words I want to use to define it, right? But I remember thinking this. I remember thinking at one point that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, his name is Yahya Mateen. What are we talking about? One of the actors in the film. He's the one who was in he was in Aquaman, he was in the Watchmen TV series.
Yeah.
And I always feel like I'm mispronouncing his name.
So
but it's like it's Yahya Abdul Mateen II.
Okay.
So I remember at one point thinking that I would have much rather this been a movie or a story about his character, because although I didn't agree with the choices and whatnot that his character made, there was something about the way the film was being told that to me struck chords with like some of the more prestigious like gangster films, right? Like there was something very kind of like Godfather-ish, Goodfella-ish. Like
but I think
even hoodlumish about.
But see, that's how they shot it.
It was talking about someone, this character. It was focused on this character that I felt like was just.
He wasn't the he was the narrator, so it would look like it was following him, but he was really just the narrator of the story.
I felt like it was his story. I mean, he was the focal point of the story, and I felt like.
But the problem was there wasn't a true focal point, and that may have been the piece that kind of took you off of it.
That could be it,
because he was telling the story, but he was telling the story from a couple different perspectives of his life. So as a child,
and he was also watching the story of him and his father, and
yeah, but that was like the thread throughout the story, and it was easy to get lost in that, because like I watched this with a friend, like, and we both watched it and we talked about it afterwards, and he didn't get that the man in jail was his father. He kept thinking that was another character, or the man was playing two different characters. So the flashbacks and the storyline, I love the way they layered it, and they would go back to certain scenes to explain things. Like it was he got sent a photo in jail, but that was him. The picture was of him and his father, and like my friend thought that was a picture of but my friend thought that was a picture of his child. Like, how was he outside the jail and inside the jail, not realizing his dad went to jail for life, and then he followed him into jail. So I think a lot of the story was lost, and they did a good job of kind of cutting it, but his narration could sometimes, with the cutting, be a little off. But I just like the story. I don't think the story was terrible or trash, but I think the story was very typical and very very honest in many ways, because you saw how people normally we see either the beginning or we see the end, and we catch it in the middle, but we don't often see both of them together. So we saw how he got to where he was, and the story started at the end, or like almost at the end, and then it went back to the beginning, and it just kept jumping throughout his childhood, his life, basically.
Yeah. So my overall feelings, like I would recommend it. I didn't dislike it. It was just there was something off about it to me in the storytelling.
Yeah, I think
the performances were decent. I thought the performances were very decent. I think, honestly, you said, you hope that he doesn't end up always playing those types of characters. I think that he plays them really well. I think that he does a really, really good job of conveying the conflicted soul, like, characters that are going down one path but are very conflicted about it. And I think that he conveys that in a very honest way. So while I hope that they aren't all crime related, I do predict that that's something that's going to be a selling point for him, that characters that are internally conflicted, because he's very good at bringing that to the surface.
But that's the one downfall that I had with Black writers that write for film, stage, or TV. They normally pigeonhole our characters. All our Black characters are normally typecast and fit a couple different genres, and so we look for characters that look like that. And I hate that about our art, and that's why I like all the stuff that's been coming out in the last year or so, because it's so different than what we're used to seeing. And it's taking somebody that's normally over here and making them a drag queen, or putting them over here and they're a superhero, and it's so outside of the bounds of what is normal.
Yeah,
But
I
I
don't
just
want
don't want him to
get
get
pigeonholed or
yeah.
even or typecast, but I also see the value in playing to your strengths. And that's not to say that you don't try to expand and grow, but I think that if you find a niche, something that you're particularly good at, and you want to kind of ride that horse for a little while, I get that too. Because I mean, he has a skill set that I feel like you can't be typecast in that. Like being able to emotionally convey.
But he's too young to keep playing the same character. You don't want to at a certain age. Especially if you're in movies and they're well seen movies, you don't want to keep playing the same character, because when he gets older, what is he going to do? There's no
But
way
do you
for him
think
to
he's
go.
been playing the same character?
It is.
Or do you think that they're so similar that they come off almost as the same character?
Well, that's what people do when people are writing films and they're being inspired by other people's films. It's like, oh, let's get him. He'll be perfect for this. Like, and it's, that's why we keep saying the same people play things. But at the same time, especially for black men, black men normally have a few different roles, and that's all they write for us in most cases. And you see actors that just get caught in that cycle of playing the same thing over and over again. So when they get older, they're considered like the B-list actors, and you see them in the same thing every time. They always the villain, or they always the dad, or they're always the funny friend that gets killed, or the smart friend that goes away to college and comes back and makes a wrong decision. Like, it's always the same thing. And I wouldn't want him at his age, and he's probably like in his mid-20s now, but I wouldn't want him to keep playing the same characters, because he's good. But how much better would he be if he did something different every time? You can play, some of the similar things, every now and again, but sprinkle in the nuance, or you will get that Cicely Tyson disease. We don't remember anything she did but play an old lady.
Yeah, but you could, but I mean, like, you could do, but like, like, I think that's a personal decision. I think that's a personal decision about,
because it gets you work.
Because we're like, right, and at the end of the day, I think that working and being a consistently working actor holds its weight, as well as how people are going to perceive you as far as being typecast or only being able to play one role. Because I mean, there's Cicely Tyson, but then there's also like Cuba Gooding Jr., right? Who I think threw himself under the bus, because I think that he was very well aware of what the black community was saying about him, and he tried to appease them, and it didn't work. You know what I mean? Like,
but yet and still, he still has been able to play an array of characters. He didn't stay in one thing the whole time. He could have been one of those characters that only did the hood movies, because he did so well in that first one he did.
No. Actually, I was talking more, and I don't know if we need to get into a deep conversation, but yes, like, I think one of his first roles was Boys in the Hood, but he absolutely was never known as like that type of actor. Like,
no, not the hood character, but those types of movies. It would have been very easy for him to keep playing those Morris Chestnut type.
Yeah, but I mean, what he did was he went on to being the happy Negro character, and although he was in a lot of prestigious movies, I think that still, because he had been typecast as the go-to black guy to play second fiddle to the white leading man, and it was a role, it was a character, and he was a phenomenal actor. And I think he just got typecast as like, okay, we got this other role, and we can put that guy in it, and Cuba Gooding Jr. would be the perfect person to do it. right?
Well,
Like,
that's part of my point, though. That was part of my point, and it has to be something in your integrity that will say no to things that will naturally be who you are, and it just depends on, and maybe that's why I haven't made it as an actor, so to speak. But I just don't want to be like, for me personally, I'm not gonna do any more funny old men. I'm just not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it because I'm not at the age. I don't want to be playing somebody 3 times my age, twice my age, and I'm not there yet. Because when I get there, what I don't want to. I want to be playing my age. I know stretching yourself is very good, but I don't want to. I don't want to always be something that I have to stretch, or you have to put prosthetics on, or you have to go. I don't want to do that all the time. I'll do it sparingly, but that's just my personal. And as you said, is a personal decision. But I know a lot of actors I know personally probably feel crazy that they keep doing the same thing and they keep being asked to do the same thing. But
yeah,
I liked it overall.
yeah, I like I said, I didn't dislike it. I just, yeah, I had some reservations.
Mm-hmm.
Anton Fisher, Denzel Washington, Derek Luke. I believe that was his first role. I think.
I don't think it was his first role, but that was his first like breakout role. He had did some smaller roles before.
Okay. Yeah. So the story of a military naval midshipman who has a pretty rough past, and is ordered to go see a therapist or psychologist with the Navy, also a naval officer. And through their relationship, we get into this young man's backstory, um, and kind of just deconstruct this young man as a character and as a human being, and figuring out what's going on with him. Very powerful movie. And won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Motion Picture, BET Award for Best Actor, a number of other accolades and whatnot. I think Denzel, in my opinion, he'd have to do really, really wrong to do any wrong. And I think this was one of, if not his first directorial effort. And is a quite a film.
It is, but the biggest part of Antoine Fisher was just the admission of being molested as a black man, and that is what this movie is most known for. And at the time, it got some mixed reviews because of that theme being presented, and it wasn't something that community as a black community was used to. It wasn't something we normally hear about it when it's attached to slavery or some type of psychopath or something. But it was at the hands of another woman who had molested him, and that's why this movie always sticks out to me, because it was the first time we saw, as black men, our mental health being put on the table as it pertains to like trauma or our past coming up to haunt us, because he was really going through some real volatile mood swings in this, and that's what prompted him to have to go as a Navy man, go to see the naval psychiatrist, which was but that's what I saw from it, and it was a very uncomfortable movie to watch at that time. I remember being real young and having to watch this, and it was very uncomfortable. We watched it in school actually, and it was really uncomfortable, because again, and then we were all asked questions about it, and I was like, it wasn't something I wanted to talk about. It definitely was a talker. I just remember everybody just talking, and the acting was great, but I don't remember people really talking about the acting as much as then. It was more so the messaging behind it. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought that this was I thought it was considering the subject matter, I thought that the film handled it pretty well.
Yeah.
It always trips me out when people get all up in arms about certain things that are depicted in movies, because I think, like if in today's day, someone who wasn't paying attention or wasn't around or wasn't of age when Anton Fisher came out, if you told them how much what the backlash was, they would think that, oh, they must have showed some like sexually explicit stuff happening, right? And it wasn't any of that. We saw some cruelty and we saw some implied sexual things that were later talked about, but there was no vulgarity to them or anything like that. And people still got all up in arms, and
I mean, today's world, this would be like a drop in a bucket. It wouldn't even be, because it didn't explore that enough. It didn't go into it. We just saw the reaction of the current state of his mentality based on that happening to him. And even today, it's still an issue because people, I remember on my other show reporting on DMX disclosing him being molested by a babysitter at the time, and it being laughed at or just over talked and not being really addressed. And that was just recently that happened. And it just, people still are at a space where men are expected to have sex with older women as their rite of passage. We dealt with it with Little Boosie as well, and paying prostitutes to have sex with his son and nephew and such. So we see the cycle has not yet been really broken, and it's still an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about or even to admit that is a wrong or even a reality. So I just remember that being the focal point of this movie, and people not feeling comfortable about it,
not being able to accept that as a normal conversational commentary on something that has been long unaddressed in the community. Anton Fisher, definitely worth the watch. In my research for this, I stumbled onto the Real Awards. Have you ever heard of the Real Awards?
No, I think I may have heard of it, but I don't know it.
Yeah, like the Real Awards is like it's an awards, it's a film awards.
I think it's like a festival.
It's like a festival, or it's an annual awards ceremony. So it's just like any of the other award ceremonies, the SAG Awards, the Academy Awards, all that stuff. But it's hosted by the Foundation for the Augmentation of African Americans in Film, and they just celebrated this year. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary. But they essentially do what every other award show does. They just do it for Black folk. And I didn't know anything about this until I was doing the research for this segment, and I'd already seen the film. I just wanted to catch up on what awards they had won. And that's how I stumbled across that award show. So I'm gonna be looking into them. Like Denzel, like in the 20 years that they've been in existence, Denzel has like 6 wins total for these Real Awards.
It's mostly independent films.
It's the BRAs. It's the Black Real Awards. And we talk a lot about not having our own. And I've never heard of the BRAs.
Well, a lot of them
like yesterday.
So they're like film festival awards. So normally, if you see like an independent film and they have like all of those, it's like little emblems around them. So it's like
But
the
this isn't a film
festival.
festival.
Well, none of them. Well, most
This
of them
is an
aren't.
award ceremony. This is
No,
not a.
I'm saying, but they're all grouped in the same thing because a lot of them award certain films for certain things. So
Mhm.
a festival is not like you're sitting and you're going from this theater to that theater, and they're normally selected by a panel of people or the audience, or depending on which one it is how they vote for it. But there are a lot of film related and or fringe film festivals and such around, and a lot of them are black because a lot of black people have been disenfranchised, especially when it comes to independent films, because a lot of our films don't normally get into the con and French festivals and stuff like that. So a lot of these they're normally donned with the title film festivals, because that's normally where a lot of the independent films or the smaller budget films really get seen and get heard. So you normally don't hear about them as much. Like here in Baltimore, we have a couple different film festivals that do awards every year. So unless you're local to them, that's when you will hear, or if you're in that film world, and in terms of being an actor or something like that, you'll hear it. But they all basically award, but you'll be surprised as to what films go into them. And you would think it's a big film, but at the time, Anton Fisher was an independent film. It wasn't like a blockbuster or a big budget film.
Well, no, I mean it had a substantial. I mean, I think $15 million is a substantial budget. It may not have had. It may not have. That may not be a substantial budget when you look at it overall in the course of films and whatnot. But it was like a 10. It was like somewhere budgeted between 10 and 15 million, and I think it made about
3 times as much.
About that, yeah. So like probably about 30 million.
Yeah.
In its theatrical run, not including like its VOD or DVD and VHS sales. Yeah, not like a box office breaking film, but a good one.
It was compared to, and that's one of the things with our films that always gets talked over, because most mainstream movies, which are predominantly white or not black, they normally get accolades for the budget that goes into their film. Our films, we normally get a fraction of that budget, but what we normally make from that budget is normally 3 and 4 times. We normally make more than the blockbuster films make in our independent films, but because of the budget we had, is not considered like a blockbuster type of film. So we often triple our budget or quadruple our budget. That's why it was so much for Jingle Jangle this year. It was so much put into it because they actually had a huge budget to do all that stuff with.
Right.
So that's why our films often look the way they look, because we don't have a budget.
But, I definitely agree with that. They had a $12 million budget, and they made and they grossed in the box office just over half of that. So it's like 25 million for Anton Fisher.
Right. Yeah.
But that was Underground, the TV show. I think we had talked about this back when we were planning this episode, that I had like missed Underground, like while it was on TV.
Yeah.
And I watched it. I think it's a phenomenal show, and I'm actually surprised that Underground was only 3 seasons, that it didn't really become, I'm surprised we weren't singing this one to high heavens. Because we talked about, I think we talked in a previous episode about some slave movies, and specifically talked about Django Unchained. And I think I told you that I always felt like Django was the most accurately depicted version, like in a film, of slavery. Like just a raw, uncut kind of like depiction of its cruelty and some of the things that were going on. But the issue was always that Django was still just like this fictional character that existed in this, you know, basically this white man's version of like, this is what slavery looks like in my mind when I hear about it, right?
But most of the slave movies, with the exception of maybe Roots and maybe the Nat Turner movie, were all produced by white people or written in most part.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, those movies, I always felt like, to me, they still skimmed around just the like the day-to-day practical brutality of slavery.
Yeah,
right?
they never showed our revolts.
They didn't show the dynamic relationships, the day-to-day stressors, the day-to-day psychological effects that this was having on those who were enduring that. It was just always kind of like it was either like Roots, and you saw some horrifying images, and then there were like these other movies where it was kind of like you would see a white person being mean to a black person, and then everything else was.
But look at who's producing it, who's writing those scripts,
right? And it was because it was right. But and I'm sure that part of that, the reason why it was like that was because of it being produced by white folks, right? And then you get Django, which I thought was just a no holds bar,
it was
uncompromising depiction of the slave South, right?
I guess it's just the person who produced it. I didn't really.
Right, yeah, if you got a problem, and if you have a problem with that, I think that that's a legitimate argument. But for me, it was just nice to finally see someone not try to skirt around the issues of slavery or make it out to be something that maybe possibly wasn't that bad. Like if you
but also look at the perspective. You got to look at the perspective also. Most of those stories were told from the perspective of the or they pointed out the white people in the stories, or the ally, or those people. But something like Django was from the perspective of the black person, right?
So then to watch Underground and understanding that Underground was produced by a black woman, written by black people, produced and then showcased on a black owned network. It was very, very refreshing to see.
Yeah.
And finally, I don't have to, when I'm talking about slave movies, their impact, which ones were the most realistic, I no longer have to just throw Django up there as kind of like, well, this is probably the most accurate depiction.
I think all of them
hit some beats.
Yeah.
But as an overall thing, I don't think they do. I think
that shows us the importance of telling our own stories. That's the significance. Like, there should not be any white writers in the room. There shouldn't, if there's a white producer, there needs to be an equal powered black producer where our stories are really getting the sunlight and they're not just remember, I think we talked about 12 Years a Slave when we were choosing, and that's my problem with 12 Years a Slave. They on all the especially the European flyers, it was more of a.
You were talking about how they chose to market it.
Yeah.
But even 12 Years a Slave, the film itself, I'm just talking about like the film. I felt like there were parts. 12 Years a Slave actually, like I still felt like there were parts where they brushed over it. But I also like 12 Years a Slave. I think that as time has gone on and this has become more of a subject to talk about, the movies that are being produced, especially in the wake of Django, are becoming more and more realistic. Because I actually didn't have a problem with the way that slavery was portrayed. I did have a problem with what you have, which is the white savior.
But what if we're just numb? What if we're just numb and it appears that those stories are watered down? What if we're just so numb to the storytelling of slaves that we're just numb to it? And it took a Quentin Tarantino movie to like shock us. because it was so gory and so bloody. But
no, but that's what
all
it
of
was
them,
though. Like, but
I'm
make no
not
mistake
disputing
about it.
that. I'm not
But
disputing that, but I'm
yeah,
just
so like
feeling
I
like we're
think that
numb to it.
if you're gonna tell me that, then it's not. No, I don't think I was numb to it because up until movies like Django, I don't really think that it was in a comprehensive way. I don't really think that it was fully displayed. I think that it was in bits and pieces. Like we saw him, you know,
He
like
wasn't telling the story.
not
That's why
he wasn't telling the story.
I said we weren't telling the story. It was
Oh,
always it was always it
talking
was
about
always portrayed as a slave movie, but honestly, we weren't the ones telling the story. 12 Years a Slave was about an actual person, but it wasn't us telling the story. You know, Roots, it was a black man telling the story. And it was a big difference. It was a big difference.
but see, that's what I'm saying, yo. Like when I watch Roots, I don't even see it.
Yeah, but
Like that's, and I
understand
was gonna
who's
talk about
telling the
Roots. Like I
story.
was, you know, we all know the, you know, what's your name and the whipping scene
Right.
and all of that stuff, right?
Have you
And
watched it as an adult?
Huh?
Have you watched it as an adult?
The last time I watched, I watched it as an adult, as a young adult. It's probably about 10 years ago now.
It's something that I can't watch that every year. It's not one of those, but I try to watch it periodically because the story changes. From your perspective, from my perspective, watching that when I remember watching it when it was on TV. Yeah. And then watching it when it was like an anniversary special of it. And then I watched it like last year or so, like a year or so ago. No, I don't want to watch the remake of it because I'm one of those people. A story like that, why would you make a remake of a story like that? What that's an actual factual moment. Why update that story? You know, there are plenty of other perspectives of slavery and our history. Like nobody's told the story of Hottentot. Like, why not tell her story? Why make a remake of it? Like that's just my perspective.
You got a real big issue with remakes. You know that?
Because I think we cheapen our art and our perspective on things when we just keep remaking things or making the black version or the younger version of something. Like Roots was the younger version when it came out. So I think that story should stay the way, because it had like T.I. in it. Once they started naming the people, I was like, no, I ain't doing it. But
you talking about the new version?
The new versions. They was like T.I. was in it. I was like, nope, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. And I respect that. I just, you know, I'm not totally against the remake.
If it's done well, because sometimes, you know, like I love The Wiz. I'm not a fan of The Wizard of Oz, but I love The Wiz, and that's a remake of a movie. But certain movies, if it's done well, I'm into it. But when it's done for the sake of, you know, just making a black version of something, we're too talented for that. We have too much history that's never been told for us to keep doing the black version of something.
Well, I think that I you know, like I agree, but I want to say two things. One, I think that because of economics, I think that when black people produce stuff, I think that we need a considerable amount of our people, because you know, Brad Pitt produces 12 Years a Slave, and like black people go to see it, white people go to see it, like everybody goes to see it, right? I don't see the people who go out to see a Brad Pitt movie coming to see a slave movie produced by or directed by Nate Couser, right? So I think that the problem and one of the barriers to us producing our own sometimes comes into, you need a platform. And I think this is why underground worked. I think you need the support of your community. And when it comes to film, Like I will say that in our community, yo, like I think there's a large portion of our community that doesn't support the medium of film in a financial way at all, right? Whether it's black or white, like that's just not their experience. And we know this because we both we grew up in Baltimore. We know that there are whole families that have never or very rarely go to the movies or buy anything. Everything is bootleg, right?
Right.
Whole bootleg economy, and that affects the bottom line when we start going out looking for investors and things like that. Like people know that,
and that's what they make decisions on. And
so
I'm really against that. I'm really against that.
That's how, and they do make those types of decisions based on those types of metrics, right?
What they think we want to see.
I don't even know if it's what they think we want to see. I think even when they have something that they know we want to see, I think that it's still for a lot of investors, it's a risky investment.
But and that's sad. That's so sad.
But what's sad is that in our community, if you look at that as sad, we also have to acknowledge that what's also equally sad is that within our community, when our people produce and do something, we will still bootleg it.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's the sad part for me.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm an actor. I see.
Yeah.
I've been in productions that were phenomenal, and we invite critics out to come see it. We give them tickets. We give away tickets to our family, but nobody will come see it. But if Tyler Perry comes into town, they'll flock to go see that. Or if Kevin Hart or somebody else isn't, they'll flock to go see it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's up with that dynamic either, but I can tell you, Nate, like, we've been in shows together, we've worked together on, and I can tell you right now, yo, like, I have a number of friends that if I was a little bit more petty, I would probably question my friendship with them because they have never come to a show. They've never seen me on stage.
Right. I've had shows, I produce shows myself, and that's a reality.
And that's the reality. And that's so that's me and you on like this local level, right? And all our friends got to do really is show up, because most times we can comp them. And even if you come to a place like Arena Players and say the ticket is 20 and you ain't got 20, but you got 10, more than likely they're gonna let you in, because it ain't like they selling out the house every single night.
That's my unless I've gotten a grant for something, especially if I produce my own work. Even when I don't do, normally if I'm in something, whether I'm producing it or not, I don't give out comp tickets. I may give them to my students. A student who's done well, I would normally give it to a student or something like that. But I never give out tickets for that reason, because I've given out tickets and they still don't come.
Right.
Yeah. And I know the work is phenomenal. I know the work, and I'm not patting myself for the productions on the back, but I know they're great productions, and people they're waiting to see you in a bigger platform.
Right. And we get that we need to be supporting, what I'm saying? Like, before that, in order to, that's how we get people there, by supporting them. So I think that when it comes to when you look at it from a movie perspective and the investment or lack thereof that we see in our films, I think that we a lot of times can be shooting ourselves in the foot over that. With that. So with this one, with Underground, I think the Underground was so incredibly popular. One, you've got this great producer and writer, right? It was exceptionally written. It was exceptionally directed and produced. They made some really bold choices that just worked. The
casting, for one, like it wasn't the typical faces.
Right. The casting was phenomenal. But then also it being a Black produced show that was also on a Black owned network, right? So it came out on Oprah's network, which already had its following. And even with Oprah's following, like it still only lasted 3 seasons.
Because we have the stuff that we promote normally has a derogatory reflection on us, and that's what. And a lot of these things, like you said, you didn't catch it until it was off or later on.
Yeah,
and that's
and
normally
to be
when we
fair,
catch stuff.
but I've said that about a lot of stuff, and that has nothing to do with the work so much as like where I was at the time.
No, it wasn't. But that the reason why streaming networks are so popular now is because of that thing. Because people want to watch stuff on their own time. They don't want to watch programmed television anymore. They want to watch stuff.
I don't think OWN wasn't originally a streaming network.
No, I'm just saying OWN. It was programmed. Programming it comes on at a certain time every week or every day. But people don't want to watch that anymore. People want to watch stuff on their own. You know,
yeah, I want to see it. I want to see it.
Right, a lot of network stations was losing money because people were watching stuff, you know, bootleg or on YouTube. Somebody will upload it to YouTube and people were watching it because it was convenient. That's the whole reason streaming networks are even a thing now, because regular television programming is not. That's for older people that are, you know, and even now they're not watching it. They watching the streaming networks, but yeah, we really have to get better at supporting our work when it comes out.
Absolutely.
And not being lazy and stereotypical, even if you're watching it on a streaming network.
And we gotta be better. We gotta be better at understanding what's our work and what's not our work.
Right. Do your research.
We single-handedly turned Black Panther into $1 billion film, right? Yeah. But as much as I love that film, and I know that we still supported those actors and those actresses that were in that film, and all of the Black people who worked on that film. Ultimately,
none of them have ownership.
The bigger chunk of change, the ownership dollars of that film went to Disney.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or you know, I don't know if the merger had been complete, but to Marvel, you know what I mean? And we, you know, like it sucks, but it doesn't suck. It's just an extra layer of.
It does. To me, it sucks. It sucks.
I don't think it. I don't know if it sucks.
Look at the amount of marketing that went into Black Panther compared to the word of mouth marketing that we saw. Black films and Black projects normally have to spend a big portion of their budget or do all these fundraisers to actually promote the film versus, you know, there being a budget for it and people taking it by word of mouth and them not even having to use their budget if it's a white platform or because it's just alleged that they just have a bigger following, and that's normally not the truth.
Well, I don't know about all that, yo, because
we promoted Black Panther. They paid very little money.
What I'm saying is that like
they didn't even have merchandise.
You have films, you got films, yo, that have marketing budgets where they have to build partnerships with other companies to pay for their marketing. You know what I'm saying? Like the Bond films are a perfect example. Like the marketing for a Bond film is almost as much as the film itself. It's ridiculous. And a lot of these tentpole films and some of these like white films are like that. Like that's just what they do. And yeah, we don't always have access to those same tools.
But we do. Our word of mouth. If you would just share it. Just share it. When you see it, share it. You know, the same thing we did with Black Panther. When we saw it, we shared it. We put our own posts up. We got showed people how we was going to dress on that day. And we went out and found African stores where we can buy African clothing.
We should do that with every film. Because the funny thing is, yo, like, and I know this because I'm into the comic book films, but like every Marvel movie that comes out has its niche, right? And within that niche, they do what we saw black people do for Black Panther.
Yeah, talk it up.
You know what I'm saying? Like talk it up, post about it, get their friends excited, all of that stuff. Like those things happen on other films. It's just when it comes to the black film, it's just us. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like Jake, you know, like in our you know, like in our next episode when we talk about the comic book films, right?
Right.
Like the guest who's coming in to talk with us about the comic book films, like he and I have been friends on Facebook for a while. So when those movies come out, like not just Black Panther, we went ham, but we went ham for like Infinity War and Endgame, and when Iron Man 3 came out, and you know what I'm saying, like Spider-Man Far From Home, we went ham for all of those movies. You know what I'm saying? So that's just something that happens.
And we have that power within our community to be able to sink or make something swim. We have that power and just our ability to promote it word of mouth. I've seen things get destroyed because of people's posting, and I've seen things flourish that was horrible, that should not even have seen the movie theater, that gets put on because somebody in there thinks somebody's sexy or whatever. But again, this series was great for what it was. I hate how our stuff always loses out because of momentum.
Now let me ask you this. Do you know if it was canceled or did they just end?
Well, everything on OWN, I'm skeptical of people. When they say something's going to OWN, I'm very skeptical about putting something on OWN because it's always a budgetary issue. And I think for Underground, it was blamed on the fact that it costs a lot of money to make and just keeping that budget going. So which
is true. I mean, it was a period piece.
Right.
So, you know, and when you know that period pieces are more expensive to put on, right? You need set, you need location, you need costuming.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that should have been put on another station that could have handled that type of budget. Oprah wants something that's packaged, put together, that's polished and ready to go. And that piece, you know, the longer it would have went on, the more it probably would have cost. And that's what I remember that being one of the things that was said about it. It started costing more money. It came to her network costing money. And then it began to cost more because now we got to make more elaborate sets. We can't keep using the same set or keep using the same storylines. We got to expand. Yeah. The principal character in it, the Harriet Tubman, she dies at some point. So, who else we gonna talk about? So they and I think that's what it was. They didn't know what to talk about.
Creatively, that's an opportunity to tell other stories, right? You don't have to pigeonhole,
but it should be set up that way because they made it seem like it was the Harriet Tubman story.
You have to set it up that way from how do you say you have to set it up that way from the get. I think trying to do that or make that adjustment later on would be an issue. So I'll give you an example, like what is it? American Horror Story, right? It was set up from Jump Street as an anthology series, right? Yeah. So you automatically understand that from season to season, you might see the same actors. They're not playing the same characters, that the storyline is completely different. The setting is different, all of that stuff.
But the budget still gets put into it.
The budget does still get put into it. But here's the thing. You don't necessarily have to have an exploding budget every time. And what I mean by that is that your budgets don't necessarily in a format like that have to continuously go up and up and up, because let's say season 1, I do a season around, it's a period piece, whatever, right? And then season 2, we do something that's like more present day. Or even if we do something period piece, we're not building on what happened the season before. We're telling a whole new story. So we can factor in the budget constraints around that, right? So yeah, because I mean, like, you look at American Horror Story, and there's nothing in American Horror Story that would indicate to me that the budget's just
I think a better
up and up and up.
I think a better example would be Crown. If you look at Crown, and I've watched a lot of the directors' conversations behind Crown, and they have an exuberant budget. And this show is not an American show. It wasn't a Netflix original. This was something that was derived in another country, and they used Netflix as their platform to be able to put it in and market it to an American audience, because they figured we would have the most, intrigue. But they had a huge budget, and this was a period piece, nevertheless, because it was going through time, and every season or so it had to be updated. So now they're thinking about what's going on in the third. They already had a third season, and my point is, the projected outcome normally affects us, because they don't feel like we'll want to watch something long term, or we would put the energy into watching something, even if it's being put on a streaming network, because we don't pay for subscriptions. That's the alleged thought. But all of these people that's watching,
I'm sitting here with all the subscriptions.
And I just looked at, earlier today, I was looking at it.
Shit coming up on my cable bill that I got rid of.
Yep. But I think it was a great show. I wish somebody picks it up. Maybe a History Channel or something like that picks it up or encourages it. But I think it's been a minute since it's been a regular season, so that's normally hard to pick back up.
Difficult to pick up at this point.
But so next,
and it's crazy, Netflix, because Netflix be the place where you can go and get saved. Our next show. All right, so this is a Hulu original called Bad Hair. Came out around Halloween time, so it's still fairly recent.
And we have
like this weird hybrid.
It's one documentary that we have that's called Good Hair, and I chose that one because of this one, because they kind of have the same theme to it. But it was it was a little weird.
It was a hell of a weird movie.
I just saw it, actually. I didn't even watch when it came out.
And I think it was weird because I was expecting it to be, it was marketed, at least in the Hulu trailer and marketing materials, I was expecting it to be much scarier. Like, I thought that it was going to be like a straightforward horror film. It turned out to be more of a kind of this kind of like comedic body horror.
I didn't like it.
Hybrid.
I didn't like the comedy in it. I was watching. I couldn't figure out. I was like, "Is this? Are they trying to be funny?
Because it was at the wrong time.
If it's just coming off as funny." It was it was comedy at the wrong, awkward time.
It was a very awkward film. It was a very awkward film. I liked it though.
And I think we don't realize it was a period piece. It was still a period piece. Like, it was in the 80s.
It was set in the 80s. It was set in the 80s.
That wasn't
one of the key, like,
it wasn't really,
it wasn't drummed up. Right.
Yeah, you didn't see it. It felt like something that was today. It felt really Issa Rae-ish. And then they told us it was in the 80s. Like, it really didn't have a lot of 80s other than the hair. And even the hair wasn't 80s, so to speak. Some of it was, but and some of the costumes was, and it just wasn't. it could have been so much better. I wish they would have played up budget, but also with the storyline. I mean, to write it is gonna cost the same amount, but I don't think that they utilize. So the young lady who was kind of the star of it, her father was really into, folklore and that kind, black science, history, and they didn't really do a good job of connecting what he was trying to get her to learn with what was happening. And it was only at some point when because it was really awkward that she was the only one that wasn't as affected as everyone was. It was a lot. And then I know actors need work, but you can tell when actors are just like, this is a paycheck. And that's what it felt like. I felt Vanessa Williams was like, let me just get me through this. Y'all asking me to do a lot of technical stuff, a lot of stunts for this paycheck. Let me just get through. And that's what it felt like at some point. Like they were just getting through it, especially when the comedy. I don't know the young lady name that was trying to be the comedic person, but it was awkward.
It was very awkward all the way around.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, but that's because I can appreciate an awkward film.
This was really
I still can't figure out if it was intentionally awkward, because some movies are done and they're done in a way where like the awkwardness and like the uncomfortability of the film is intentional.
Yeah.
I still, and I've watched it twice now, and I still can't figure out if this was an intentional thing or if this was just the result.
You know what it looks like? I think with the success of Get Out, a lot of things came after Get Out that was trying to match the cultural balance with science and with horror. And I think a lot of things came out that was trying to be Get Out. And it just couldn't. It just didn't hit the mark. Even stuff that what's his name? Ken. The guy who did Get Out. Even stuff that he did after, I could tell he was basing it off of the success of Get Out. And you could tell it just wasn't like it just didn't have the same, vibe to it. Like a suspense movie is different than horror. And I think people kind of get them confused.
Well, they blend a lot.
Yeah, and it's not, you have to know what you're doing. Or it's just luck, I guess, just luck. But the humor, I was like, is this a horror movie? And they're trying to be funny. Is this a spoof? Like, I was confused. I didn't even realize we was in the 80s.
I think that they were trying to blend some of those things, because I think that it was a spoof, but I also think that it was a spoof that was trying to take itself seriously.
Right, like at the end of the movie, like the way they closed it out, I was like, what is? So the white man who was the head of the network was really the person putting all his hair out there, like. And then there was this tree at the end. I was like, what is, it's too many references to stuff that wasn't fully explained.
Yeah.
And you're like, what is going on?
So the writing seemed to be a little all over the place.
Choppy, yeah, it was too choppy.
It was choppy.
It was I like the message though.
I would say, like, if you're watching this, check it out. Let us know in the comments what you think. Because I've kind of, it's been a mixed bag all over the place. It seems like some people enjoyed it, but an equal number of people are like, I can't stand it, but it always comes down. It seems to always come down to whether or not this stuff is intentional, or was it like bad because it was trying to make a point, or was it bad because it was just bad? Like, it was just not well done.
What I hate that it was saying though was, the fact that women wear weaves, or I didn't like that connotation to it.
What connotation?
Well, in terms of like the fact that all these women went and got this straight fake hair in their head, and they were all like all natural at some point, and then they went and got this fake hair in their head. And that part I didn't like. That's why I chose the Good Hair documentary to kind of
I'm not sure what you mean by that. What are you saying?
So in the film, so in this movie, the whole point of all of them having weaves was because the Vanessa Williams character came in and tried to, you know, commercialize the station that they were on, the network that they were on. And one by one, all of them went and got a weave put in their head, and they were all natural before. So that idea of women doing this to themselves in order to make it, or to be taken seriously, or to be looked at as a sexual being just because they had this hair in their head, and then connect that thing with, you know, the whole harvesting of people's hair, and then the cultural reference. It was too many references to too many different things, and they tried to mix it all together.
All right. No. I will not argue with you or disagree that there was definitely some convoluted elements to the movie. However, I do question what you were just talking about, because I mean, isn't that how it started?
No,
like
I'm saying
the societal, because I mean, I feel like the Vanessa Williams character was the epitome, or like the representation of like the societal pressure on Black women, right?
But it was confusing at points, because if she was going through the same thing with her hair, why was she giving these cards out to these women to go get the same
thing done to them? Which I think, and I think you touched on this earlier, was like, why didn't the main character fall victim the way everybody else did? Right, because you can assume that the reason why Vanessa Williams' character was doing that was because she was under like the full possession of the hair, right?
But you know what?
Character never falls under that.
When she first comes into the story, and I saw that sloppy wig on her head, and you see the marketing for it, and I was like, oh, it's something not good. It's something not going to be good about this.
And then it started moving.
Right. Her hair, it was big, and that was the 80s, but it didn't have references. It was just too much.
I think that the references were nuanced though, because what I was saying about it starting to move is that the thing was that the hair got worse looking as it okay, so you've seen like Little Shop of Horrors. We talked about that, right? So the plant started dying, the leaves started dying, he would lose energy, and then he's like, feed me, Seymour, feed me. Well, the hair was essentially acting the same way. So like if the hair went without blood or went without its nourishment, then it would sit there and it would become unkept, and it would be like looking real crazy.
And it was weird. It was just weird moments when she was about to put on the pad, and it went down inside of her pants.
Anytime it sensed blood, like the hair was trying to go for the blood, because that's what it
like. Oh my, this is fucking crazy. You don't get to pick anything.
Those were the moments those are the types of moments in movies, those quirky moments like that I actually do appreciate.
Disgusting. That's not quirky.
It's the concept is disgusting, but this is like essentially like a demon hair that wants human blood. So like it fits.
This one too far though.
But I can tell y'all right now, budget, you can see the budget constraints in this. The effects are at times very laughable, and it's hard to tell whether it's intentional or not, but I enjoyed it for what it was. Let us know what you think in the comments.
Oh, that was
moving on to our Christmas themed films. The Preacher's Wife. Preacher's Wife, which is a remake of a white film.
Yeah, it was. I hate that you said a white film.
you know, I gotta call you out on that. I got,
but it wasn't. I mean, I guess at some point it was well known. It was like in the 40s, set in the 40s originally. And watching that one, it really is nothing like this one, and it goes to show you,
we're
like,
biased, though, Nate.
Say it again.
I said we're biased.
Well, it's not even biased. I've seen both of them, and they're just.
I know
the first one is just not good,
and I'm just saying we are biased. Because white people be talking about classics all the time that I go back and I watch and I be like, what were y'all talking about? But it's because I'm biased. Like,
yeah,
I feel like I'm always going to consider the black version as the better version.
Well, and we're actually going to touch on that. And this is probably going to be one of the movies that we touch on, because I want, in the second season, we're going to do an episode that does this, like which version was better. And this is definitely one of those situations where this one was better, because there are other ones. Like I remember, we're not going to get into that now, but there are definitely movies that I prefer the original versus the remake, because I'm not a big remake person, because it's hard to follow a remake, especially if the first one was really good. But this one was tremendously different. And in terms of the storyline was still the same, but the relationship amongst the characters were a lot different. And it had Whitney Houston in it and Denzel Washington, and it was. It is a standard for me to watch this every Christmas. I get choked up at every time the little boy has to go. So it's just a lot. I love it. It's some great characters in this one. It was really packed full of some really good actors. It was one of I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but there's a gentleman in this, and this was his last movie. And he was a phenomenal dancer and actor and singer. But I love it. I love Whitney Houston singing in this.
You're not talking about Gregory Hines, are you?
Gregory Hines, yeah. Gregory Hines. Okay. This was his last film.
Was this one of his last films? Yeah. Probably was.
Yeah, this was his last film. And the soundtrack was phenomenal. She sung the whole soundtrack, Whitney Houston did. But I love it. It's something that I watch every holiday. I start watching it around Thanksgiving, and I continue to watch it until Christmas is over. And sometimes I watch it just because, but I definitely watch this for Christmas. So this is my number one Christmas movie.
So it's not mine. I don't know if I have a number one Christmas movie.
Well, you said Die Hard.
Because I will watch Die Hard. Like I watch Die Hard anytime.
That used to be
it's one of my favorite movies of all time, but it is considered a Christmas movie.
Right.
I was just thinking, like, do I have like a quintessential Christmas movie? But yeah,
I think all of us love Home Alone. I think that was like
I don't
a staple. For me, it was a staple every Christmas.
I loved Home Alone as a kid. I recently watched Home Alone like within the last 6 months, and I didn't, or at least I caught like half of it. And I was just like, I think
because we watched it so much, and I don't even think I think the first two I watched, and I think there was like a third one I didn't watch at all. Because by the time the third one come out, it wasn't even him; it was his little brother that was playing in it.
Yeah,
and it was just dumb to me. Like, if you still getting lost, you need to get lost. But I think I watched them too much.
I didn't really think it had. Like I have a standard, like, and I could be biased about it, but there's certain movies that I come around and I'm just like, they don't seem to have really good replay value, and all that means is that these are movies that I remember very vividly from my childhood, but now they just don't hit the same.
But you watched it, you put a hole in that movie. Like, I know I did.
Okay, so but
especially the original one.
Here's the thing. I'm not saying that for some people that may not make a difference. I'm just saying that there are other movies that I have equally put a hole in that I still can sit down and watch repeatedly. You know what I'm saying? So, like, for instance, like, so with my kids, one of the movies that I loved as a youngster was The Goonies. And I watched it with my kids and I was just like, bad. Like, I was almost embarrassed that I showed them that movie, right? But then the next week we had another family movie night and I showed them The Sandlot, right? And we all loved The Sandlot. Now, The Sandlot is a movie that I remember that I constantly watched all the time. Crooklyn, right, was a movie that we watched all the time. The kids, my daughter saw Crooklyn for the first time. We watched it. She laughed. She cried. That's a movie I can watch all the time. Just last week, we were watching Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which was something that, like, it's corny as hell, but like as a kid, I loved that. And like to watch it with my kids a week ago and realize that it had the same effect on me as it had as a kid. So there's a lot of movies that I have worn out, just like I wore out Home Alone, and yet they have this replay value. Like,
well, it's also movies that are just holiday movies that because that we're now in a space of streaming networks. So there was a time where that came on TV and it came on all season long, and that's all you could watch. So of course, let me watch this again. But now we have options. There are certain movies that every holiday I watch The Wiz every holiday because that's really a holiday movie, and people don't realize
it's definitely a holiday movie. Like, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. We watch that every year too.
Yeah, so that one, I may watch Home Alone if I see it pop up somewhere, but I watched Preacher's Wife, and then like maybe a Charlie Brown, but Charlie Brown that hasn't really been coming on as consistent the last couple of years, but I think because of the streaming networks. But yeah, I mean, it's just certain things that you just watch. But now that we have streaming networks, we have options. We so bougie now. We don't just have those 5 channels anymore, but we can watch anything we want.
Right. So they stepped their game up. But Die Hard is my quintessential Christmas film. The only thing Christmassy about it is that it literally is set
during Christmas time. Right. That's the same thing with The Wiz.
Like, this career, this is a great movie. It's a career-defining role for Bruce Willis. I loved it. In the present day, we're starting to see Black actors get these types of opportunities, right? For these, like, Bruce Willis, and Nate, you talk about this a lot about getting typecast and whatnot, because Bruce Willis was one of those characters that was typecast at the time that someone decided to take a chance on him as an action star, right? Or in an action movie.
Right. Then he became this cool, bigger than life person. You're like,
right. And I mean, it literally made, as we know Bruce Willis today, this movie made his career.
Right.
But like when this movie came out and the trailers, like before it came out, when the trailers came out, people were like really confused. It's like, wait a minute, this thing is a comedian. He's from he was in a TV show called Moonlight, and you know what I mean? Like, so nah, but like, y'all know the story. I don't feel like I gotta go into all this.
Right.
That's my quintessence. That's my Christmas movie. We're gonna watch it this Christmas. I'm gonna introduce the kids to it. And we're gonna watch some Die Hard. Our next film is a documentary that was produced and I think directed by Chris Rock. Called Good Hair. And Nate, why don't you tell us a little bit about the documentary Good Hair?
This is kind of like a book into Bad Hair. And they may have made that movie based on this documentary. I know they probably did. Because it's too close in themes, and then the titles are polar opposites. But he basically went around and did these interviews with random people, a lot of celebrities, speaking about what goes into them doing their hair. He starts out the movie and throughout the movie giving all these financial facts on how much money women put into doing their hair and getting their hair done, and weaves versus natural versus wigs, and all these different forms of hairstyles, and what has it meant to the black community in terms of women more specifically. And it really you see, especially some of the celebrity that he interviewed, and it was almost like he caught a lot of people off guard talking to them about their hair, because a lot of people were still trying to be so secretive about, the fact that they had weave in their hair, or they spend hours getting their hair done. It was just amazing to him. All this stemmed from his daughter getting her hair done and him not realizing all that goes into it. And then there was some sad parts of it, because a lot of women suffer from alopecia, or they suffer from baldness, because they wear so many weaves. They get their hair done so tight. And it was parts of this was meaningful to me, because before I decided to just cut all my hair off, every semester in college, I remember I would do something different to my hair. And that experience of being in a hair salon, getting your hair braided or getting it twisted or something, it really does, that's kind of our cultural socializing that we do within our community also. But it was a really great a documentary. I think you should watch these two together. Like when you watch Bad Hair, watch Good Hair right after, and it'll explain itself. I think the parts that made that movie weird, this will kind of fill in the right
some perspective.
Exactly. It was because it was the movie was just too. It was all over the place. But if you watch this, it probably will give a lot of it some perspective on hair and how important it is to, be you and do you. But yeah, that was good hair. It was pretty good. I liked the documentary. I've only seen it once, but I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
So we coming up. We got a couple left.
Yeah. The last one is going to be Chapelle show. Nah, like we're gonna talk about the Chapelle show and in its entirety. And I think this really comes out of
is there a line or a phrase from this that just sticks out to you?
I'm rich, bitch.
Right.
Fuck your couch. Like,
right.
Yeah.
That's
like I could go on and on and on and on and on, honestly.
Right.
I think there's a lot.
Is there a favorite character? Do you have a favorite character?
You don't know what's funny, like I still think my favorite character of this of the whole series is what's his name? Clayton Bigsby.
Yeah. I think I ask a lot of people that's their
it's funny, like I think Dave Chapelle said an incredible amount. Like I think he said a lot without saying a whole lot about race in that skit.
Yeah, but he doesn't just point the finger outward; he points it inward into our community and that I think that character was definitely one of those Trump supporters that didn't know why, but just had to vote for him. Like before Trump way before Trump was even thought about being president.
When you say that you felt like he pointed a finger at our community, in what way?
In terms of how he does a lot in terms of race conversation and exposing racism and bigotry, but at the same time,
you talking about in the series, like just in the show period.
Well, okay, I think that scene, that series of snippets of him being the Bigum's character was about racism in general, but it was almost the joke was on us because many of us try to be something that we're not. And the fact that the character was blind was hilarious, but I felt like that was more so a knock against many of us who try to be white or who try to fit in that world.
But and how hilarious isn't that effectively Dave Chapelle?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
he does he's very self-deprecating in terms of like putting it on himself or putting it on his culture and not just talking about white people. But it'll be like the outline of the joke would be them, but somewhere in that joke it'll be like, and you stupid too. It'll be like on us.
I mean, where I would have gone, like my thought on that was that the Clayton Bigsby did a twofold thing. First, it showed, it was another great example of just how ridiculous it is, racism, and itself, like how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
How when you put it into perspective, right, and watching it come out of the mouth of this blind black man, and just how ridiculous it is, right? Like when you really break it down to its most basic concepts. And then, in the Clayton Bigsby episode, what I thought was interesting was that despite the fact that he had interactions with black people, no one like told him, like no one pulled him to the side and said, "Hey, bro, I don't know if you know, but you know what I mean?"
Like when he would be driving down and it's like white people playing hip hop music and he yells out the window. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But that's how foolish we look sometimes trying to fit in with other cultures versus our own culture. I think that's exactly how we look when we trying to fit in and be everything but black. But I love that one, and I love the crackhead character because
Tyrone.
Because his character, that character is very similar to the Whoopi Goldberg crackhead character because he's very intelligent, and there were moments where he showed how intelligent he was, like how educated he was, but yet you still on crack. Like what's the balance in that? It's like a lot of his characters made you think, and it just evoked this level of conversation that we normally don't have about specific types of people. But it was I love this series. Unfortunately, it ended prematurely, but I know it will never be that again.
I am glad that he walked away from it.
Well, it ended.
I did not think that it was doing much or helping us as a people. And it turns out that I think that's what Dave Chapelle is really all about, like as an individual, as a person.
Well, in the beginning, I think that it was very raw. It was very, very raw.
Like there was a lot about Chappelle's show that when you look back on it was just problematic.
But it was funny though.
Yeah, it was funny. It was definitely funny. But just because something is funny, I don't know if
I think
justification
to call it problematic. To call it problematic, I have an issue with that term as it's used. And in many cases, things are problematic, and we have to stop it. But I think the way that term has started to be used, especially referring to a show like that, we hate to see anything less than perfection from ourselves when we're seeing it in other places. So when we see things, we don't like to see things out of sorts or unbalanced or not like we would perceive ourselves to be. So I think a lot of that was, one, we saw a lot of different people that we knew in those sketches, but it's still, I can understand why you would say it was problematic. But on the other hand, I don't. Because I think he was so honest about his portrayal of us, and that we hadn't seen that be allowed like he was allowed to do. Even like in Living Color, or I'm thinking like Mad TV, it still was never done to that extent.
But did you ever consider that maybe what the reason why it was never done was because most of the black comedians were like, I'm just not going to take it too far?
Well, I think
like, he didn't really like, let's be real. Like there's not a lot about the Chappelle show that black people can look at and say, yeah, like that's us. it's a lot of
well,
like
it's not necessarily
on a lot of stereotypical, a lot of white stereotypical perceptions of black people.
But
Like
the
played
good
on
thing
that
about
a lot.
him, the thing that I love about Chapelle, all his stuff is always over the top. And some of it is like subtle, but it always gets to the over the top realm. But it's always a message in it that like some of it was just like the whole Rick James, like that was hilarious only because he was a part of the joke. But it still got to a point where it was a lot of honesty in it. And I think he shows so much honesty that and sometimes he tells jokes that you had to be there to find it funny, but he still used it. So all of that stuff with Rick James and Eddie Murphy's brother, like a lot of that was real shit that they just made funny. Like they just brought it to their sketch.
But Joe, like that was funny, and it was like this funniness because there was this like understanding of interpersonal relationships that we had with each other. That now we're like on Comedy Central, and we could see them and like share those with other cultures and laugh about it. But then it was equally those, and I had to come back to the same phrase. There was some very problematic depictions in the Chapelle show of black.
Like what? Like what?
Like the the black reparations. Like the black reparations. It was funny as hell, but it was problematic. It was funny because it played on all of the stereotypical things that
like what we would do when we got
amongst black people, and and just because we understood that those things would happen in certain instances doesn't
like, that because of who most of his audience was. So if he had an all black audience, would you say that still?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know. I want to say yes. I would think that either way because I know that white folks are always watching, right? But I'm not gonna sit here and I'm not gonna
because
my opinion might be framed around the fact that this was something that was on Comedy Central.
Yeah,
essentially is more of a white station as far as like who their audience is.
I understand that perspective because proximity matters to me. So if something like that was on BET or TV One,
I mean, every good one has to have some self.
But we wouldn't have, like you said before, early in this season, early in other conversations, would people have watched it if it was on BET or it's TV One? Would people have watched it?
Yeah, I think people absolutely would have watched it. Would they have watched it? Would they have watched it? Would it have gotten the popularity that it got?
Yeah, I think the popularity was because we had to go out and see it.
I don't think so. I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
Because I've gone to several of his comedy shows and they were mostly white.
Black people have we have been made to feel like when we are doing our own thing, we're racist.
Right. Yeah.
Like we really have been made to feel like that. Like no other race in America feels like that. Like Asians do shit amongst other Asians, with other Asians, for other Asians,
and don't feel the need to be.
And they never feel the conjunction. They never feel the compunction to have to, one, justify why they're doing it, or two, be worried about being viewed as like black people are the only people in.
But see, I followed Dave Chapelle very early on because I used to only go to comedy clubs. I never went to anything else outside of what I did personally.
So let me ask you this: yes or no? Was Dave Chapelle more or less? Was he more of a comedian that? What am I trying to say? Was he more of a comedian that appealed to whites or blacks?
I think his sense of humor appeared, and only because of the sketch comedy aspect of it, to whites. But we loved his storytelling. Like his stand-up is more for blacks. I think even though more white people support him across the board, but when he did his show, I think more white people like that. But when he does his stand-up is when we feel like we love him more. I don't think because sketch comedy for us, it wasn't always something that we I don't want to say we didn't excel at it, but it wasn't something that even as actors, like I don't like sketch comedy because there's too much improv in it for me. And I don't really like improv as much. And that's his brand of comedy. Is a lot of improv in it. A lot of his storytelling then took it to another level. He took it to another level and made it more theatrical, meaning he added more action to it. And that's basically what the Dave Chappelle show was. You know, and it was different from In Living Color and Mad TV. It was very different because theirs was scene build. His was more like an improv of a joke that just went on. And theirs was like they were actually building scenes, so it was completely different. But I think his base is white, but his followers are black, if that makes any sense. Because I know that's like saying the same thing.
My only thing with that is that who is he catering to? And I think early on, and I think part of the reason why he ended up leaving, I think that he realized he was doing more damage than he was doing good. Because while I can go back, I mean, and this is all up to people's interpretation, but here's mine. I loved and laughed at the Clayton Bigsby
hilarious to this day.
I thought that all of the skits around, you know, the him as the first black president, reparations, Ashley Larry, and the crack Tyrone.
Yeah.
I thought that there was that I can absolutely say that there was some level of honesty. Like we all know these people, we all have interacted, or we know of these people in our communities. But at the same time, I think that how he did it, where and under what circumstances, I
do again. So I agree with
it was
you.
A detriment to the community,
and I agree with you.
We were laughing at it. Yeah.
But his audience and the people who got him there were white. People didn't really know or follow Dave Chappelle. They knew who he was, but they didn't really follow him in terms of black people until he got that show. That's when they started following him, because I went to a couple different shows he did, and it was white, and not just white, like good old white boys were coming to his shows. Like the white boys we wouldn't really want to hang around, like the Tulsa white boys or the Hamden white boys or the South Baltimore white boys. Those were the types of boys that all of those people came to his show. Basically, stoners, the stoner community came to his shows. But I think I understand where you're coming from, but I think he has a sense of humor.
The honesty about being black to white folks. And
but the joke was always on even though he exposed us, the joke was always on them.
The joke was always on them, and I think that got lost on a lot of black folk.
Yeah,
and even lost on me for a while. Like it took me a while to realize like the genius of Dave Chappelle, because I do think that he I think he's a genius as far as like his comedic talent, timing, and just his approach to comedy is absolute genius.
But he's another Richard Pryor. Like I remember seeing a lot of Richard Pryor's younger work, and people didn't get him because he talked about being a crackhead and getting his dick sucked by men, and that was off-putting by people. But now he's considered this god amongst comedians. And I think the same thing is going to happen to Dave Chappelle, where We got on the train at a certain point.
I agree.
And the longer he's out, like him, his comedy now.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
His comedy right now isn't as silly as it used to be. He's very
his content. I think that his comedy now is as purposeful as it's always been.
Yeah.
But it's much more
directed to.
And who is directed to, and who's supposed to be getting something, or like who really needs to be listening and paying attention to this.
But see, what he's done is when I speak about integrity amongst us as artists, who he is today is what I'm referring to. Because sometimes you can't, all money ain't good money, and you have to be careful. Just because this is your fan base don't mean that's who you need to make yourself pivot towards. And I think he was stuck. He got stuck for a moment there, and knowing that these are the faces that's in his audience, but these are the stories that he's telling. And it was like almost he was giving them freedom, or giving them bits and pieces of who we were in private, and that wasn't as good. But we started following him halfway throughout the process, so we can't blame him for having that as an audience. But like you said, I think in the next like 10 years, he's going to be on the same level as a Eddie Murphy, or if you were a follower of Whoopi, or one of those type of comedians.
I'm probably right.
I agree. He's getting more seasoned, and you can tell he was real silly, potheadish at first, and now he's more.
Definitely. I mean, he's older, so
he's
got the gift of perspective now,
right?
And I can honestly say I like the way it's going.
Look on YouTube at some of his older, like more obscure stand-up like he has several different ones on there where he's talking for like 3 or 4 hours, and nobody does comedy like that. No, and he's literally in a bar with a mic, just talking to the audience for 3 or 4 hours, telling jokes, sharing stories, and you don't see that from comics that often. Normally, if they do a stand-up special, it's normally 45 minutes to an hour and a half. But he was just talking to the audience for like, and you could tell it was like some little dive bar somewhere. But I like who he is.
I've heard about those.
Yeah. But I like who he is now, and how he. But it's as an artist, it's the arc that we all have to have. At some point, you only do certain things. You won't do this. Like, it's certain things I won't do anymore, even at the level that I'm on. But yeah, I love the show, and as a whole, it was things that I didn't like, but as a whole, I did like the show.
All right.
So
that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much. This is episode 7 of a Binge-worthy podcast. I'm your co-host, G Oliver. I'm here with Nate. Nate Couser. I'm gonna call you Nate Couser, nigga. I don't anything. I'm just Nate, and like
right.
G Oliver and Nate Couser here from the Binge-worthy podcast. Nate, can you tell them real quick how they can find us on social media?
You can find us. So actually, I'm gonna put up the sign so we can just know right off the bat. But we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. And you can let's look us up. Let me take us down. Oh shoot, I put it up wrong. So on Instagram, you can go to Binge_worthy_podcast, Facebook, the Binge-worthy podcast. And actually there's somebody else that's up now that's trying to share our work. I had to get them to take our stuff down, so don't go to their page, but you'll see our banner up as you see it up on a board, up on our board. So just follow us on social media. On our YouTube page, it's the Artist Exchange Radio Show. We'll soon be moving over to our own YouTube page soon. But you can go on the Artist Exchange page, and there's a whole section for the Binge-worthy podcast series. So keep on subscribing, keep on liking, so we can get this thing monetized and we can do better and look better and all those things. So thank you all for watching, and I guess we're out.
Hold on. Also, let us know what you think in the comments, right?
Yeah.
If you like what you heard, let us know. If you don't like what you heard, let us know.
Yeah.
We definitely would like to improve based on our audience participation. Let us know also what you thought of the films and the pieces of work that we discussed tonight. Let us know what you'd like to see us discuss.
Yeah.
Possibly in the future. We're always looking to take in some suggestions on some works that we can include in our episodes. And be sure to come back next week. We got a special guest, Jacob Marbury. We're going to be talking about comic book movies and the whole industry and how that has been moving over the past few years. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming in. We'll see you guys next week.
That's it. That's it. That's it.